of leadership. Leadership is something that God's blessed me with since a young age, whether that's through sports, my friends, or the people around me. It took me a long time to realize that I actually do have what it takes to be a leader. And I would often ask questions like, am I capable of motivating the people around me? Does being a good leader mean I have to be a good leader all the time? And should I be a leader when others around me are way better at leading than I am? This is something I had to wrestle with for a while until one day I was on a hike with my mom, and God revealed to me that He was real and that He had big plans for me. The Holy Spirit said that He was here to direct and lead me and to never let the world bring me down because God's way is always better. God then led me to a Bible verse that I hold true today, which says, Philippians 2, verse 3-4, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only unto his own interests, but also to the interests of others. This helped me come to the realization that while I might not be a perfect leader, fostering meaningful relationships with the people around me, in my opinion, is the most important aspect of leadership. For instance, during last football season, Luke, who was new to the sport, joined the football team. He didn't really know much about tackle football, and it was pretty obvious to me that it was his first year at tackle. He asked loads of questions like what to do or how to do something differently. I realized that as a leader, it was my job to invest in a relationship with Luke, so that's what I did. We would stay after practice, work on routes. I would talk to him during practice, stay after, and I would actually get to know the kid for who he was outside of a football player. I would try and give him pointers on how to run a play well or run a play differently. I then quickly realized that Luke was a player that did actually look up to me. He respected me as a leader because of the relationship that I built and invested with him personally. This made me realize that having meaningful relationships is necessary in becoming a good and or great leader. Through this Capstone experience, I was hoping to gain an entire new perspective on how I view leadership, and I think Capstone actually did allow me to do that. At first, I really didn't know what I wanted to do for Capstone, and I would actually hear rumors about people leaving the school just to avoid it. But then I quickly realized that it really wasn't that bad at all, and it actually did, believe it or not, teach me a thing or two about leadership. The first lesson I learned through this whole Capstone experience was that while having meaningful relationships for me was the most important part of leadership, a lesson that I had to learn is that being a good leader means that you can't be friends with everybody. When I first started discovering this idea of leadership, I would often think that if I wanted to be a great leader, I had to be friends or close friends with everybody. I tried doing this for a long time, and I actually realized that instead of being a leader that people look up to, I was instead just being a friend that was really only interested in laughing and having a good time. Being a leader means that sometimes you're going to have to make tough decisions that not everyone is going to like. And while it's good to be someone's friend, being someone's leader comes with certain responsibilities that you have to follow. This was pretty hard for me to learn because it feels like I have to be friends with everybody, and in doing so, I'll actually become a better leader. That's what I thought. This obviously is not the case, and it's okay to not be friends with everybody. In fact, there's some leaders that don't have many friends, which is okay. What I'm not saying, however, is that in order to be a quality leader, you can't also be friends with somebody, because that's obviously not the truth. Friendship is actually a vital aspect of leadership. But what I am saying is the moment that you're only that person's friend and you're not leading them in a way that betters them, that's where a problem can occur. A leader's role is actually to inspire, motivate, and guide the people around them towards achieving their objectives or goals. If you find yourself doing the opposite of this, that's when you must realize that your approach to leadership is actually wrong. A quote by Bethany Joy Belvin says, "You can't be friends with everybody, but you can be friendly towards everybody." This is something that I feel like I really took to heart because it's nearly impossible for me not to talk to anybody or, invest in a relationship with most people. But it changed for me once I realized that you can lead someone in a friendly manner without actually being their close friend. Another huge lesson that I had to learn was that in order to be a good leader, you have to know the type of leader that you are. Mr. Schultz actually told me to take multiple different personality tests so I could figure out my strengths and weaknesses as a leader. And more importantly, the type of leader that I personally am. The first test I took was the 16 personalities test, which describes the type of person that you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are as a leader. This test told me that I was a campaigner. Campaigners are enthusiastic, creative, and sociable free spirits who can always find a reason to smile. This test also told me that I'm 84% extroverted, which means that social interactions is something that I strongly value personally. And I also tend to be enthusiastic and express my excitement. After further looking at the results of the test, I found that I'm 80% intuitive, meaning I'm very imaginative, open-minded, and curious. I also took the Enneagram test and found that I was a Type 7, an entertaining optimist. It says that Type 7s are joyful and sociable free spirits that try and create optimism in every situation. As lovers of variety, they live life big and are eager to enjoy all the new experiences that this world has to offer. They see the endless possibilities and innovation all around them. I found that my personality reflects that of a free spirit entertainer, but the only question that I have was, how does that reflect or combat my leadership style? I found that this suggests that I have a supporting leadership style, and I'm all about collaboration. I came to find that as a leader, if I work with my team and help them either in sports or a job setting, that's how I personally feel the most accomplished. I knew that since relationships are vital in becoming a great leader, I had to answer the big question of how to lead and have relationships with others that may have different or complete opposite personality types than me. I thought and thought and thought and came up with really 5 things to do when engaging with different personality types. The first being to know what the differences are and avoid labeling. When noticing that someone has a different way of thinking or communicating, it can be easy to label them as annoying or frustrating. But some people are more introverted, so it's important for me with a loud personality to refrain from labeling somebody as that frustrating or annoying person. The second big thing is to see people objectively instead of personally. What I mean by this is it's crucial to try and depersonalize your own feelings and accept that some people are just the way they are and there's no change in them. Judging people in terms of our own personal preferences can lead to anger and frustration. The third thing then that I learned is it's important to embrace difference and ask questions. Sometimes it's easy to avoid people that think differently than you, but it's important to try and take the opposite approach and ask questions about why or maybe the thought process that that person was thinking and why they thought something differently. Different personality types are very important because it will challenge you as a leader to extend your way of thinking and ask multiple questions. The fourth thing is to look for the common agenda or goal. For instance, in sports, if you're a leader, it's important to note that you're leading that person to win the game or win the championship. It's also worth noting that there's always common ground, even if you have a different personality type than that person. The fifth and final thing to note when you're engaging with different personality types is the importance of being flexible with your communication style. If you try and adapt your communication style to fit that other person, then that's a very, very good way to reach them. If you know someone is more introverted than you, it may be better to have a one-on-one conversation with them instead of that of a group setting. Using these 5 different tactics, I can personally say has helped me become a better leader and giving me relationships with people that I have regardless of their personality type. The last lesson that I learned is that there is actually a very big difference between leadership and management. This is something that my mom told me in September, but it really only meant something to me towards the end of my Capstone experience. I wondered if I was only being a manager at times instead of leading. This was a question that I wanted answered by an actual leader, so I decided to ask Mr. Cooper what he thought the difference between a leader and a manager was. He said, and I quote, "I think a manager stores someone else's vision. So I can manage a store. Let's say I'm in charge of a Chick-fil-A. I'm going to make sure that things are scheduled and stuff is ordered and we're executing what they tell us to execute. But I'm not the one that's actually creating that vision for Chick-fil-A. That's somebody else who's had the vision and inspiration and is now passing it down. So I personally think, he said, so I think as a manager, you store someone else's vision, but as a leader, you're the one that's speaking out that vision." He further went on and said, "You're inspiring others and compelling them and wooing them towards achieving it. You're both simultaneously walking in front, beside, and behind people towards that amazing end." This really stuck with me because I'd never really thought of it that way before. I used to think that if I was going to be a great leader, that meant that I had to boss people around and tell them what to do. And as a result, I truly noticed my relationships with people deteriorating. I realized that this really took away from leadership and made me a bossy manager instead of a good leader. I wanted to further understand the difference between a good manager and leader, so I found a clip that clearly embodies the difference between a leader and a manager. The gist of the video was that Simon Sinek was a person who's a very inspirational leader. He's led all around the world. He does many different talk groups with different people, and he more or less tries to get to know the person instead of just knowing them as a number or a digit that he's forced to lead with. And in the video, he talks about knowing that person for who they are instead of knowing them just because they're on your team, in your job, or in your sport. And he talks about having that personal connection and the importance of having that personal connection with that person. And he really stresses that as a means of how he, as a very professional leader, has gotten to become or be at that spot that he's at because he's had that personal connection with people. And he said that in doing this, it's made him less of a manager, less of a bossy manager to people, and more or less of like a leader that inspires and lets people on their own achieve their dreams and goals. So that's the gist of the clip. Sorry, the word. I found the video compelling because it shows how important it is to put the person you're leading before yourself. It's easy to see that sometimes we manage others because we personally get something out of it. But Simon Sinek in the video makes it clear that that actually takes away from leadership. Instead, what he's saying is that as a leader, you have to let the other person rise as an effect of your positive influence. Interestingly enough, however, the Bible talks about this and says, "But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." That's Matthew 20:26-28. This verse emphasizes the importance of servant leadership, where the leader puts the needs of others before his own. A sense of selflessness that is shown all throughout that verse. A good leader should also have a servant attitude towards the entire team, where they strive to empower and serve their team rather than just bossing them around and telling them what to do. All in all, this made me realize that for me, if I don't have a relationship with the people that I lead, I can end up becoming a bossy manager instead of an effective leader. In the end, however, I can truly say that this Capstone experience has let me personally figure out what becoming a good leader means to me. Interestingly enough, when I first started this whole Capstone thing, I was originally going to do my Capstone on leadership through football. But then once I realized that the football season is going to end, it was kind of hard to do my Capstone experience on just football. So changing my Capstone from leadership through football to the art of leadership actually taught me a valuable lesson. And the lesson is that good leaders don't just lead in their sports or occupations, but they lead in their everyday lives. Which ultimately led me to the conclusion that relationships are actually the most important part of leadership. The Bible actually says, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in the world, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity." That's 1 Timothy 4, verse 12. It's clearly stated that great leaders are those who don't just lead when they feel like it or when it's easy, but they lead in every way and in every aspect of their lives. While leading is the first step, the Bible further stresses the importance of leadership by saying, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching," showing that leadership is extremely important, but truly valuing the relationships that you have with people you lead is also equally as important. So today, I challenge each and every one of you to continue growing the relationships you have with the people you lead, because I promise that it'll change your life. Thank you.